Welcome to Minority Viewpoint. 1492 to 1992, discovery or invasion. That's the really big debate this year. In 1990, El Partido Nacional de la Raza Unida participated in the First Continental Conference on 500 Years of Indigenous Resistance to discuss the Indio perspective of the 500th anniversary. Daniel Osuna is the International Secretary for El Partido Nacional. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Michigan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. The weather's real nice compared to Arizona.
You got here on a good day. I'm going to have to play the devil's advocate for a minute if I could. This is a celebration to many people. Why complicate it?
I don't think our intent is so much to complicate a so-called celebration as it is to bring to the surface maybe the truth or a perspective, an indigenous perspective of what we're supposedly celebrating. So, and I wouldn't like to reduce our intent to something as just complicating a so-called celebration. Again, the whole intent is to raise the educational awareness and the consciousness of the people involved as to what are they celebrating in the first place. Is it the so-called discovery of America, or are there other factors involved that we've never learned about in that discovery?
In Michigan, maybe in across the country, there are so many indigenous people that are assimilated, and they don't want to be a part of this resistance, or they don't want to draw attention to themselves in this way. I mean, isn't it difficult to convince the masses, and if it's difficult to convince your own?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, it is real difficult. It is difficult. But when people are assimilated, it's because they want to belong. They want to feel a part of. And so they do that by trying to mimic whoever is the dominant society of whatever they're a part of. And in our particular society, then they want to mimic that dominant society, and they don't want to create any waves because they feel accepted and they feel like they belong. And so if you begin to kindle history and things that have happened in history, they see that as going back and just kindling fostering some old things that have happened that have nothing to do with today, which is nothing. There's nothing further from the truth than that. Is that fact that a lot of those conditions are still happening today. A lot of the reason that the quote-unquote Hispanic, or what I would refer to as the Chicano-Mexicano community, is in the condition that it's in, or the indigenous community is in the condition that it's in, not only here in North America, but in Central and South America as well, is because of those same things and same attitudes and that same domination that happened then that continues to perpetuate itself today.
Isn't that, I mean, 500 years is a long time to cast blame. Is that what this is about?
No, but that is a good question, because in any tragedy, it is sometimes beyond blame, it's beyond philosophy, it's beyond nationality, it's even beyond ideology, but it's never beyond truth. And the whole focus of the work that I'm doing as the International Secretary and some of the tour that I'm on is to deal with the truth, because it's like, if you have somebody, we learn about it all the time in dysfunctional families and in people that have drinking problems, and there's always the denial process, right? The denial stage of that you're in a violent relationship with someone and you can't get out. The first thing is to deny. If a mother finds out that her husband is molesting the children, she goes through a denial stage. In whatever the case may be, that's what we're dealing with here. For Western European cultures, there's a denial stage. The fact that that there's been a victimization of a people that has not only happened 500 years ago, but that's still happening today, and that has manifested itself into a modern situation. We don't seem to see that because technology has allowed us to look at things differently, and so we believe that because we've advanced technologically, that we've advanced humanistically. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing more contrary to the truth. You know, many of the conditions and attitudes of human beings in today's present situation are just as bad, if not worse, than they were 500 years ago.
So in your tour and in your presentation, are you trying to educate and inform?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we started discussing the quincentennial because we knew it was coming up. The Reagan administration had already proposed tens of thousands of dollars to go into recreating the 3 ships, so on and so forth. And we thought, well, we didn't want to react. The one thing we didn't want to do is we didn't want to react. We didn't want to go out and have a demonstration. We didn't want to go out and do this and be anti, quote unquote, Columbus. We thought, if it's always said that the best way to get people to think is to educate them and show them a perspective that maybe they didn't know, then maybe it would help to deal with looking at things from a different color of glasses. I brought a book, and it's called The Voyages of Columbus in His Own Words. And the book is a children's book. It's a pop-up book. And what it does is it talks about Columbus, but it leaves out a side of history. It intentionally neglects a side of history. And when you do that, and you intentionally do it, you distort the truth, and the truth no longer becomes the truth, it becomes a lie. And that becomes the problem, because then you have one people telling a side of a story that's incorrect. And so it creates all kinds of divisions on those that are telling the story and those that the story is being told about. And so that's our intent, is to tell the truth of what are some of the other sides of this neglected side of history and truth, so that people can look at it from its purest form and begin to come to maybe different conclusions of what we need to do as human beings to start to integrate and act, work together.
To rewrite history is a monumental task. How receptive and realistic is that a goal? I mean,
it's a monumental task, but it's not so much the question of rewriting history, because again, using a wife whose husband is molesting their child, does she go back and rewrite that, or does she just go back and admit what has already been written? Does she just go back and admit that, okay, yes, this was done, and in doing so, cleanses herself and is able to go through the healing process of changing her life and changing his life, as the molester himself, because he would also have to admit that he has a problem and that there's something he needs to do. In the same premise, in the same token, that's what has to happen amongst humanity in Western European cultures. They have to come to terms with the truth. So we don't need to rewrite history. We need to look at how we're going to continue to write history. And are we going to continue to perpetuate that neglected side of history, to perpetuate a biased attitude, or are we going to start to look at the truth and focus on that so that we can begin some of the healing process between human beings?
To use your example of the dysfunctional family, to heal, you go through a period of anger.
Mm-hmm.
Are we already angry, or do we not even know enough to be angry? And in your presentation, do you deal with that effectively so that there is no room for generating hatred towards other groups, European or Anglo or whatever you want to refer to it as?
There is a group that's already angry. That's obvious. When you have demonstrations, when you have things like the LA Rebellion, there are people that are already angry. There are a group that aren't sure what to be angry about, and those would have a tendency to be the complacency group, or the group that's not even aware of its own history of colonization and domination. So their desire to fit in pushes them to be more complacent, because they figure, what's the use anyway? What control do I? How can I change anything? It's greater than myself. What can I do? The presentation clearly stirs up a number of emotions. However, let me state this about the presentation. The presentation is not philosophical. It is historical. In other words, I'm not giving you my philosophy on Columbus. I'm not giving you my philosophy on the Vatican. I'm not giving you my philosophy on presidents of the United States. I'm merely reading statements that they've made. I read statements by Columbus, by the Vatican, by Queen Isabella, by King Charles V, by President George Washington, by Thomas Jefferson. These people themselves making these statements of how they felt and how they looked at these people at that time, or our people at that time and today. And the pictures I show are pictures that are drafted by Europeans themselves. So I'm merely putting this history together in one slide presentation and bringing it to the public as an educational piece. This is the neglected side of history. This is what was intentionally left out. These people intentionally took that out and said, we don't want to show this side because we'd have to tell the truth.
Daniel, we need to take a break.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. My guest today is Daniel Osuna, and he is sharing his philosophy and components of his presentation that he believes are have had a long-term effect on the acculturation, the growth, the development of the Chicano, of the Mexicano, right, of the indigenous people on the American hemisphere.
That's correct.
You were talking in the first segment about anger.
Right.
I want you to complete your point, but at the same time I want to ask you, you talked about the complacent individuals, the ones that felt that there isn't any use to any of this. Okay, so you educate them, you inform them, you stir them up, you make them angry. Walk me through how, I mean, who's going to be there to direct that anger to make this a positive outcome? Gosh. Again, I'm playing the devil's advocate here.
I know. Don't give me too much responsibility here.
And it's on tape.
This is anger is just another form of emotion. You know, there's you can be angry, you can be happy. You know, whatever it is, it's how you direct it. And in the presentation, and the intent of the presentation, yes, it stirs up emotions, yes, it stirs up anger. That anger isn't for the intention of going out and hating Western European cultures or hating white people. The intention is for us
to... Or hating their condition.
Or hating their condition. Well, what it is yes, you do want them to dislike, to show them their condition, that their condition doesn't have to exist that way. But the most important point is that it's upon us. It's our responsibility. We can no longer use our victimization as an excuse for not taking on the responsibility that comes with taking your rightful place among humanity. And the only way that's going to come about is when we start to look at our conditions and what we can do as our conditions. And you made a comment in your question as to how will that happen? Will it happen with present-day leadership? I don't think so. Present-day leadership is so splintered, and on the most part, they're so ignorant, and then in their ignorance, they're so arrogant. They're ideologically splintered amongst each other, and they're not willing to come to terms with each other to change the conditions of the masses of their people. So the only way that I see that it's going to come about is by work that's being done with youth. You know, and that's happening across the country, across the board. Youth have to come to terms with the only way that their conditions are going to change and the conditions for the future generations if they take the challenge that's before them. And that challenge is to raise a different kind of organizer, one that doesn't come out with an ego of self-imposed correctness because they're based on their charismatic capabilities, but that is going there because they sincerely want to help their people and because they have a vision.
Didn't we try that in the Chicano movement in the 60s and 70s? And what happened as a result of it? Where did we lose the leadership?
In the Chicano power period of the late 60s and early 70s, there was a lot of charismatic leaders that came up. You know, Corky Gonzalez, Reyes Lopez de Reina, Jose Ángel Gutierrez, a number of other people from. The biggest problem with that period of the movement is there wasn't never enough analysis to recognize that there was a need for secondary, third, and fourth levels of leadership. And so many of that leadership became so engulfed in their own ideological direction and own ideologies that they weren't able to even come together with other sectors. So just at the point of peak of their movement, they began splintering. You know, even some of the two most charismatic leaders, Jose Ángel Gutierrez and Jorge Gonzalez splintered into two camps over ideological differences, you know, and they weren't able to rise above that ideology to come together based on what was best for the masses of their people, and compromise some of those ideologies to find a way out.
Does the leadership that we have or don't have today, I mean, is that a result of the 500 years of, what do you want to call it, oppression?
No, it's colonization. I mean, you know, there are no other, I mean, that's what it is. There's 500 years of colonization. A colony has changed its definition over the years, but colonization basically means a people that are taken, and you have, in our particular case, it's settler colonialism, because you have people that have come and settled here and then colonized the territories that belong to someone else at the same time, I mean, or before they're coming. So it's colonization, but there's a decolonizing process that has to go through. How do you become a whole human being? If you've gone through a dysfunctional family growing up, then what needs to happen with you as you get to that point as you become an adult? Many adults go into therapy, right? To go through a deprogramming of what happened to them, of the things that were negative, and they take the things that were positive and they use those. The same thing has to happen with us as a people. There has to be a decolonization process, and when that happens, then they have to build themselves as whole human beings. The things that are lacking in us as human beings are our dignity and self-respect. And as long as we don't have those two human factors in place, then we're never going to move forward, because we look at ourselves negatively. Like I said, we can't no longer use our victimization. Well, what I'm saying is that we look at ourselves as inferior. They no longer need to have chains on our ankles, you know, as slaves, because the enslavement is mentally. And we perpetuate it now. We perpetuate it as our own people in a cyclical form from generation to generation. And that's what we need to break, you know, because we need to break those chains that are mental, and one, we also need to break that barrier of fear that keeps us from moving forward because we're afraid of the consequences.
How long is this going to take?
That's a real good question. I don't... The actual, to actually, it depends on what sector you're talking about. I mean, for us as a people to start to move forward, that will happen within the next few generations. We see that happening now. I see youth, even though media may perpetuate or focus on the youth in gang violence, the reality is there are a lot of youth doing a lot of good things out there. A lot of good things. A lot of youth speaking out in favor of changing their conditions and wanting to do things to change their conditions. And so the fundamental stages are already happening. The reality of how long it will take humanity to come to terms with interacting with itself, and I mean not only people of color, but including Western European cultures, will depend on how long they will go through the denial process of dealing with the truth of the fact that their Western European cultures are not superior to us as a people, nor inferior, but then nor are we, you know, and we have to work from that premise.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
A lot of information. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
When we return, we'll literally wrap up the program with Tony Palacios. Don't go away.